Thank you, Sarika. I'll note before I get started here that despite working for the Cement Association for California and Nevada, I'm not going to talk about cement. I'm going to talk about concrete here at ACI. It felt novel. After hearing from Larry and Dave and Peter, I don't know that I could add a whole lot to cement that you'd want to hear about today. So I'm going to talk about California building codes, where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. It all started off a long time ago in 2019. The Marin County Low Carbon Concrete Code. This was put together by a group of folks up in Marin County and the kind of in general the California Bay Area. And they took a look at what was being done in their jurisdiction, and they wanted to have lower carbon concrete. And I'm going to tell you, when this happened, we really thought the sky was falling. We thought this is the end. This is the end of the California concrete industry. There's no way that our industry can live with rules like this. We went up there and testified, please don't do this. You guys don't understand cement. You don't understand concrete. You don't understand the logistics. They went ahead anyway, and we were really concerned. So things that are in this code, they have options to comply with a low carbon limit by means of limiting the amount of cement that's in your concrete. You can also do it by means of submitting an environmental product declaration talking about the GWP that's in your concrete. You can comply on a mix-by-mix basis, or you can comply on a project-wide basis. Today we'd call that a carbon budget. And they also have means that if you have cement from a plant that is lower in carbon than the national average, then you can scale up the amount of cement you use by that similar ratio. And in the intervening 6 years, I would say they did everything that we would ask anybody to do. I don't know if they knew it at the time. I don't think we knew it at the time. But it actually works really well. And I'll note that the cement limit looks odd. The reason that they did that is that in 2019, when they were contemplating this low carbon code, there were no concrete producers in the entire county that had the ability to generate an EPD for concrete. But they said, hey, we want low carbon concrete anyway. In the intervening years, their homework has been copied by the city of Santa Monica. If the values in this table look familiar, it's because they're identical. It's also been copied by the city of Dublin, also up in the Bay Area. They added a little stick to theirs here. If you don't comply, you owe them $190 per metric ton of excess embodied carbon. So that's kind of fun. We don't have action yet, but the city of Los Angeles is contemplating some kind of low carbon concrete code. They are not talking about copying the Marin County code, though. They are talking about copying some aspects of the Cal Green code that I'm going to come to here next. So Cal Green Code is the law of the land in California. It is part of the state building code. It went into effect January 1st, 2024, and it covers non-residential buildings over 100,000 square feet and school buildings over 50,000 square feet. And part of the plan and the implementation was that this will go to all buildings over 50,000 square feet, all non-residential buildings over 50,000 square feet in January. That was part of the implementation plan. It offers 3 different paths for compliance. If you're going to remodel an existing building, you have to reuse 45% of the structure. If you're going to take a prescriptive path, you have to be under 175% of the NRMCA industry average carbon values. Our industry did not lobby for that, right? Lower your rifles. The 175% came from the officials at the state government, and we said, really? 175%? And they said, yes. We want to put a stake in the ground that we know everybody can achieve. And we said, man, you could make concrete in a wheelbarrow that does that. And then the final path is a whole building LCA path, wherein you model, did my slides change? Where you model, it's animating. You model a model building that's similar to what you want to build and then demonstrate that your building is 10% lower than that. Full of tables like this that talk about the embodied carbon limits for various building materials like steel and concrete, higher strength concrete and things like this. It pulls in also values from the Buy Clean program. And I didn't make a slide on this, but let me take just a moment to clarify something that I've only recently learned. Not everybody understands that's outside of California, and it's easy to see why. So California does have a Buy Clean program. It's only for state procurements. So GSA buildings, Caltrans buildings, et cetera. It does not cover concrete. It covers steel, plates, shapes, bars, rebars. It covers flat glass, and it covers mineral wool insulation. So as the concrete industry, we tend not to talk a lot about Buy Clean because it doesn't really affect our industry, but it does exist. I just wanted to throw that in there to clarify that. We also now have ACI 32324, ACI's own low-carbon concrete code. If you folks are interested in learning more about this or just shooting at the people that wrote it, at 11 o'clock this morning, straight downstairs from here is the 323 committee meeting. So come on out and tell us what idiots you are. One thing that we need to recognize when we talk about all these building codes that we've looked at so far here, kind of everything that's in place in California, is that what we're doing is comparing old concrete to new concrete. And we can do pretty well when that's the comparison that's being made. Hey, 5 years ago we were doing this, we've made an improvement, and now we're here, right? Does everybody recognize that? What if, instead of talking about our individual building materials, we were looking at entire projects? What if we were signatories to the SE 2050 commitment and we were reporting the values of the buildings that we put up to SE 2050, and they were developing reports with tables that look like this? We're talking about what kind of buildings that are being made, what the embodied carbon is in terms of CO2 per gross floor area. We would talk about what kind of materials are contributing to those embodied carbons on building area. What if we were the Carbon Leadership Forum and we were going to put out guidance on what those values should be? What if the American Society of Civil Engineers were to come along and issue a pre-standard for assessing the embodied carbon of structural systems for buildings last month? And then what if you were the American Institute of Architects California group and you said, you know what, Cal Green, we love what you've done here, we'd like to make some changes. We've got that 175% of industry average, we're not in love with that number. What if we lowered that to 125%? And then what if we had, there are some potential voluntary tiers in that nobody has implemented so far, but those do exist. What if, instead of that performance path where we modeled an entire building and then showed that ours was less, we just put some of those numbers in there? Storage buildings need to be less than 480 kilograms CO2 per square meter. Education and business, 660. Other buildings, 750. And we just said, hey, don't model two buildings. Model the building you want to make and show us that your building is less than that. And then they wanted to include site concrete, anything over 5,000 square foot. And we said, that's fine. In the midst of all this negotiation that was happening with AIA California and the Building Standards Commission and the cement and concrete industry, myself, folks from NRMCA, et cetera, along comes Assembly Bill 130, a very well-intentioned piece of legislation designed to streamline the rebuilding of residential properties in the wake of the wildfire disaster that California saw in January and has seen several times in recent years. We have 25,000 homes or so that have burned and need to be rebuilt. And what this legislation was meant to do, you don't need to read this whole thing. What this legislation was meant to do is stop local agencies from putting additional roadblock requirements in the way of these homeowners trying to rebuild after a disaster. Local jurisdictions were saying, hey, in addition to that building code we have, what if you included all electric appliances? What if, in addition to that code, you were mandated to put solar on your roof? What if, in addition to that existing building code, we said you had to have fire sprinklers in your house? Maybe not the worst plan, given the reason they're rebuilding. But all of these things were adding burden to those property owners. And so they came along and they said, enough, the residential building code is locked for 6 years. And we said, that's fine, didn't think much about it. We're talking specifically non-residential buildings when we talk about Cal Green, right? Well, buried in this is this little provision. The updates shall be limited to clarifying, conforming, and coordinating changes that do not materially alter the substance and intent of the code. What's that mean for Cal Green? It means everything's out. That means there are no changes. That means that all of this stuff, Building Standards Commission slide, held for further study. So, in a sense, a temporary reprieve from reduced carbon requirements on concrete. However, this is a bit of a double-edged sword, because as the DSA recognizes, there is one triennial code cycle between now and the 2030 mandates at the state level to have a 40% reduction in GHG. So now, instead of potentially a series of step downs in the intervening code cycles, we may be staring down the barrel of a very large change for the 2029 building code, which will be coming up next. That remains to be seen. While all this is going on, we have two other laws, Assembly Bill 43 and Assembly Bill 2446, that mandate that the California Air Resource Board develop a framework for measuring and reducing the average carbon intensity of the materials used for the construction of new buildings, 40% reduction by 2035. CARB is working on exactly how to do this now. I said I wasn't going to talk about cement much, but I have one slide here on cement. We went to CARB and we said, we don't think cement is a material for the use in the construction of new buildings. Concrete is. Or in other words, show me where it says. And we think that the Air Resource Board sees it our way. We have heard from them informally that cement will not be a regulated material under this program. Concrete certainly will be, and all of the other building materials certainly will be. It remains to be seen exactly how that's going to shake out. CARB is currently working on establishing a baseline, right? They are charged with identifying what the carbon footprint is for buildings. For all buildings, right? They need to understand for any building in the state, existing or proposed or to be built, what will be the carbon intensity of that building? How will building material manufacturers report their data? How will construction projects report their data? All of these things are up in the air. We early on heard some very, very concerning things from the California Air Resource Board about reporting on the manufacturing front. They said, well, we think that the manufacturers, like the ready-mix people, for example, should report the revenue associated with those materials. And we said, hard no. You're not getting revenue data from a ready-mix producer. I see some in the room. Katha, you want to tell the Air Resource Board how much money you make selling concrete? No, thank you. And we said, hey, you guys need to stick to, don't worry about the revenue, we're not going to do that. You need to stick to environmental product declarations. And they said, well, we don't know about EPDs. We don't know about some of the background data, the primary data that's used. Some of that's pretty old. What if you only used CARB-approved data? What if your EPDs were only good for 2 years instead of 5 years? So we continue to lobby this. If anybody's really bored and really worried about it, you can tune in Thursday morning, live at 9 a.m. in Sacramento is where I'll be, meeting with the California Air Resource Board on this reporting. This is what the rough path looks like. They're going to work on establishing their baseline this year. They're going to start working on that reporting mechanism this year. They're going to be collecting data and tracking progress, et cetera, et cetera. That's all that I have for you today, but I'm happy to take any questions on this. And if you've got any burning questions about the California cement industry, I'd be happy to try to address those as well, even though I didn't talk about them here.